Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Ms. Barbara Wiseman, Ms. Yvette Taylor, Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh, Piyush Ji, distinguished guests and online members, welcome to episode 3 of Pustakalok, a book discussion. Today we will be discussing a very interesting book. The title of the book is The Last Rhinos. From the best-selling authors of The Elephant Whisperer, a story of one man's battle to save a species by Lawrence Anthony with Grant Spence. I would like to now talk a little bit about the Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve in India. All those who have thought the Indian is a one-horned rhinoceros only existed in the Jurassic era, then a trip to Kaziranga is a must for them. One of the most sought-after wildlife holiday destinations in India, the Kaziranga National Park's 430 square kilometers sprinkled with elephant grass and meadows, swampy lagoons and dense forests in the home to more than 2,200 Indian one-horned rhinos, approximately two-thirds of their total world population. Formed in 1908 on the recommendation of Mary Curzon, the park is located at the edge of the Eastern Himalayan biodiversity hotspots at the Golaghat and Nagaon district, Assam. It is said that Mary Curzon, the wife of the Viceroy of India, Lord Curzon of Kedleston, visited the park to see the Indian one-horned rhino. She wasn't able to found even one, and then she was persuaded by her husband to take an urgent measure to protect the dwindling species, which he did by initiating and planning for their protection. After a series of meetings and documentations, the Kaziranga proposed the reserve forest, which was created with an area of over 232 square kilometers in 1905, and is now rated by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site as well. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome today's first speaker, and that is Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh, who is an educator and author from South Africa. Welcome, sir, for your remarks today.
Namaskar, Shristi and the team, and to all our listeners. It's a pleasure to once again be part of a panel to discuss one of the leading novels in South Africa. It's been my pleasure to interact with one of my panelists, co-panelists, Yvette Taylor, when this particular book that we're discussing today, The Last Rhinos, received the accolade of being the 2015-16 One City, One Book accolade for eThekwini here in KwaZulu-Natal. And the reason for that was the very content of the book and the nature of the book dwelled on realism. And for me, the importance of literature lies with realism, because besides the impact of reading something, more important is the impact it has on our lives going forward. And that's what brings value to literature itself. And this is one such book. With regard to the story, unfortunately, I did not have the personal pleasure of meeting Lawrence Anthony, other than in this very book that I read and completed at 2 a.m. this morning. Lawrence comes through as a man of passion. He cared for the planet and the other beings on the planet. And generally, we as people that seem to be right on the top of the scale, we tend to concentrate on ourselves. And here was a person with such passion that he began his work and continued his work at the Tula Reserve here in KZN, where I reside. But his passion for the animals was beyond KZN in South Africa. It was universal in nature. And this story of Lawrence and his passion to save the large northern white rhino actually took him to different spheres of life, in the sense that what started as a pursuit to save an animal actually resulted in his experience in actually saving people in a region of Africa that was war-torn for more than 20 years. And it was his very passion and his very nature, his winning nature, I must say, that earned him the trust of the leaders of the LRA, the Lords Pakistan's army, which is one of the most feared, and I believe perceived to be the most feared terrorist group in the world. Two of these being right up there as the two most wanted men by the International Criminal Court. And these very people took to Lawrence because his passion was so clear and so honest and so sincere that it won over the hearts of people that we thought were not really human in nature. And that is something very touching, because it seems that the rhino and this passion for conservation actually brought out the humaneness in Lawrence that people could see, the heart of people. And it's very difficult, especially in the world that we live in, where we chase the material most of the time. Here was a man who left his comfort zone in South Africa, where he could have continued his conservation work, and went beyond the borders to save an animal more than 5,000 meters away. And that is really very, very heartening, because it went beyond the norm. And in terms of the passion that he showed for the animals, it tells us that Lawrence thought not only about people, but he thought of the beings on the planet. And very importantly, he thought of those who are not here, our progeny, the descendants, our children to come and their children, where we have to talk about a rhinoceros and all they could do was see it in a picture, or if they were fortunate, in a zoo. And that is not where wildlife should be. So Lawrence was a man not just for now, he was for the future. I would like to say that, to me, this book was a docudrama, in the sense that the writing style that Lawrence used was very engaging. It was very easy to read, but the message was really very, very deep. It struck to your heart. And I like the fact that he spoke of the reality in our lives, but in such a fashion that I would call it from a narrative point of view, that a child can read it at 5 or 6 level at school and enjoy it, but so could a PhD, because the nature of his messaging is such. And I think from a literary point of view, communication is critical. And the most important part of communication, like in the instance of literature and a novel of this nature, is to get the message across. And Lawrence does it so well. I like the fact that in the worst of times, he would find humor. One incident that strikes me is when Zan, the elephant, had toppled the vehicle with Lawrence and his two counterparts. And I think it was Martin who shouted and said, Museveni is attacking us. Museveni wants to crush us. And Museveni, of course, was the arch nemesis of the LRA. And while we could relate to the reality of the African belief in spirits and the spirits in animals, etc., clarity of thought by Lawrence at the time and Martin actually warms our heart in that it sounds funny, but it deals with a serious issue. But many other times, especially when Lawrence had to escape while being up at Jafta and had to hide in the river, even that serious situation for him was a bit amusing. The character of Lawrence, as I said, unfortunately, I did not meet the man personally, but I think Graham Spencer summed it up and he called him a swashbuckler, a man with style and flair, someone all of us would like to be like. You know, we'd love to be like this character who could go traipsing all over the country into the depths of the bush where terrorists live and where you don't believe you may come back alive. Here was a man who lived his life like that. And his passion for life, of course, lived through his conservation, but I think it helped him to self-realize in the sense that he lived out doing what he did best. You cannot call it a job. Lawrence was just a passion for life, and life was one big adventure for him. And that is something I think in this day and age, where we all chasing material, assets, that we envy Lawrence to an extent, and therefore we live through him, through his escapades. I think in terms of the messaging that he has for us, the empathy that he had for all animals, not just the rhinos that he went to, the northern white rhino, but the rhinos here in South Africa, Heidi, Nana the elephant, the pygmy giraffe he speaks about. His broad-based messaging, I think, for us as humans is that whilst we are at the top of the food chain, it gives us power. And that power should not be lost on those most in need. And he looks at animals as kindred spirits, kindred beings. that need to be protected. And I think the whole issue of poaching is a very, very serious threat to our life on the planet. Because I think all of us believe in the balance of life. And we began talking about India and the wildlife sanctuaries there for the rhino, etc. The last rhino in this case may not necessarily be the white rhino that we lost. It could be Lawrence himself. Because in life, how many people do we find like Lawrence? I also want to say to us, through one of my fellow panelists, like Yvette Taylor, that's there, the legacy of Lawrence continues. And I think the beauty of literature and writing is that while Lawrence is gone, through this book, as in my instances, he spoke to me. And I think every time this book is picked up and read by someone, he's going to speak to someone. And he could change the mindset of people. And so Yvette and the Earth Conservation Group, I really laud and applaud Lawrence, Anthony, and yourself for the work you're doing. And the very fact that it assists us in thinking out of the box and thinking beyond our selfishness and just look at us and me and I, and look at the world as it is today and how we want it to remain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. BP Singh, for those remarks. Our next guest speaker, also joining us from Durban, will take us through the sunny beaches, wildlife, and many conservation sanctuaries and organizations. And that is Ms. Yvette Taylor, International Executive Director at the Lawrence Anthony Earth Organization, LAEU. Hailing from Durban, South Africa, Ms. Taylor is a keen conservationist, environmentalist, and humanitarian. Ms. Taylor had the privilege of working closely with the late Dr. Lawrence Anthony for 5 years before his passing. Dr. Anthony was a mentor and friend to her, and she learned a great deal from him. Many of the conservation projects at the LAEAU continue today that was started by Dr. Anthony. Trained as an administrative consultant with a higher diploma in town and regional planning, she became the Earth Organization's International Executive Director in 2007, opening up and overseeing several international offices. She was spearheaded at LAEO's environmental educational programs and job training programs for rural areas of all ages in disadvantaged communities, raising awareness of environmental issues and solutions for over 10,000 students. We'd like to welcome Ms. Yvette Taylor for her remarks.
Thank you very much, and namaskar. Thank you for this opportunity. It's so lovely to speak about Lawrence. It's not often we have the opportunity to delve into this amazing man. Mr. Singh made some beautiful assessments that was somewhat surprising that somebody could pick that up from the book, because it is as if he knew his character in many ways. Lawrence certainly was a swashbuckling and charismatic man. He often would find humor in the strangest things. And one of his remarks that I remember very clearly is he would say he's got to go to university to get a degree in seriosity, because he can't be serious about things. And that characteristic is so clear in his books, and I think really carried him through some difficult times. His story with his work in trying to save the northern white rhino was quite an interesting one, and he would tackle things almost, I would say to you, so brave to be able to do this, and he would seem surprised by those comments, because he was very blasé about risk. I think any health and safety officer would have a nightmarish task trying to manage this man, because he would, get a harebrained scheme and he would carry it out. And he was quite relentless in his goal to achieve, something that he had decided on. So he wasn't easily stopped. And often when I would say to him, look, the thing you're asking me is just impossible. The technology doesn't exist. He would be, no, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to do this. Come on, we've got to find a way. And he would have me like looking for answers to things that I don't think many scientists had even conceived yet. So it's certainly a man ahead of his time. The story that he tells of going in to meet with the Lord's Resistance Army, I think carries forward that message that he would look at an issue and go, well, there's got to be a solution to this, so how do we resolve it? And so it was a sort of a blasé attitude with which he set off to go and meet one of the most wanted men in the world. I think in the top 10 list by The Hague, that's Joseph Kony of the Lord's Resistance Army. And to just give you a little anecdote on his route with the last meeting that he actually went to go and attempt to meet Joseph Kony, he called me up and he was flying from somewhere else and I can't actually remember where. And he said to me, okay, Yvette, meet me in Johannesburg airport and bring me the following items. And he gave me the whole list of sleeping bag, tent, all these survival items, because he was now going into the jungle to meet with these this militia group, to talk to them about Rhino, which in itself seems quite a strange concept, but he was determined to have that conversation. So I went ahead, I went off to Cape Union Mart and spent all my hard-earned cash and bought all the tents and the sleeping bags and lugged it all, to Johannesburg airport, and arrived there, and Lawrence came flying through international, and I'm so glad to see you've got all my things, and did you bring me some money? So I was like, good gracious, Lawrence, you didn't say you had money. I don't know, where am I going to get money from? So needless to say, we stood at the ATM, I drew, as much as I could, 2,000 Rand at a time. At that time, money was still quite scarce. And off he set into the heart of a war-torn country with 5,000 Rand in his pocket, which I think we all know is not a great deal of money to, when you're expected to pay the odd bribe and so on. As he departed, I said to him, Lawrence, please, these things cost me a lot of money. Bring them all back because we can use them in our next mission. And he was absolutely, don't worry about it. They'll all come back. And when he returned and I met him, he was empty-handed. And I said to him, Lawrence, where's all the stuff that I gave you, all this expensive equipment? And I think the reason I tell the story is just to illustrate what kind of a person he was. And he said, Yvette, these people have nothing. They might come from and have this horrendous history, but they live in the most abject poverty. And I couldn't get it in my heart to take down a tent that, people could sleep in, and children and these guys' wives could sleep in and use. And so he just left the whole lot there. And I try to be angry with him, but that wasn't always easy because he had such a big heart. And then one of the stories I think that won me over is in departing that terrible situation. All these soldiers who had themselves been child soldiers came to him with these little pieces of tiny scraps of paper, and they had written their names on it, and they folded it neatly, and they stood in a line, and each one gave this piece of paper. And the idea was, tell my family I'm alive, because they had been taken from their families, but were now part of this militia that I guess they grew up in and no longer had any way out and any concept of how to be. And so I think those things touched him deeply and made his intention to fight and try and bring peace to the area so much more vital, because he could see the human impact. And I think that's what the book does so cleverly, is you're telling the story about an animal which we see getting slaughtered, and we see all these terrible images of this animal. But Lawrence brought us on board. He made us part of the fight. He wove the story in with adventure and humor. But at the end of the day, we're all part of this family, and we're all responsible for the outcome. And that engaging nature that he has or had would bring you in, and you'd be able to say, I think I'm part of this, and I need to contribute to the fight for these animals. So his stories do transcend. They do transcend just a story about a rhino. They tell us that just with these words, he brings us onto the side of good. And I think that's the beauty of any story, is that it unites you against the villain. The villain is perhaps the poacher or this horrendous political situation that exists in Central Africa. And we want to be part of the solution. So we want to agree with this good guy who's doing this great stuff. We want to be part of the story that gets told later where, we supported or we understood. And with a simple story, you can actually bring that agreement about. The story with the rhino still continues. We have been losing rhino for many years now, starting about 2008. We've worked extensively here in South Africa with just raising awareness, bringing people in to understanding the value of an animal. I think at one stage there was the concept that, only certain people care about animals and, it's not for everybody. But I think the messaging is how we are all connected. And in being connected, we all play a role in our own survival of protecting wildlife. And I've said this in talks, and I think it's an important message, is if we lose the rhino and we lose the elephants and we lose the lions, all those things are under huge pressure. And that list just keeps going. Where does the list end? Well, the list ends with mankind. Because when you've lost all these animals, at what point are we on that ladder? We rely on so much of nature, and many people don't understand just how integral nature is in our lives and how important it is for us to be sustainable and to have nature survive well, to enhance our own survival. We can't actually be the only living animal on this planet and expect it to be successful. It just won't work. You've often heard the message of nature is interconnected. And that's certainly a message we carry through in all our environmental education. In our message is to bring people in, and I know Barbara's going to talk more about that side of things shortly. So I won't delve into too much, but certainly bringing people to understand their role in, you could almost say the food chain, but it's more than that. It's that ecosystem, that interrelatedness of all things. Our tagline is "None survive alone," and that was a message I think Lawrence carried through. Is that, and he engaged with so many people. He would bring people on board, and he would have them join in his crusade, because nobody can do it on their own. You've got to have everybody working together. And you see it on all the environmental stages on planet Earth right now. We all have to work together if we really are to bring around a change on this on the planet that that for everyone's survival. Lawrence often would say to me, and it's a question he asked himself, what would make a New York taxi driver care about the survival of the rhino? And I think that's the question he felt. If he could answer that question, he would be able to answer the conservation question, is how do we get people to bring about sustainability? And after his own research, actually, and his own soul searching and really just trying to analyze that question, he realized that the basis was education and awareness, where you could only care about something that you knew about. If people didn't know about the one-horned rhino that you mentioned earlier that is now successful in the national park, they would think all the rhino would be extinct in that country, in India, and it's not. So there's an opportunity there to further improve the conditions of that animal and to increase their numbers. But now, having told everybody about that particular animal, you can also bring about an awareness of the one-horned rhino in India. Very much with any other animal, in South Africa, we obviously have quite a dependence on wildlife for our economy. But do people know that our lions are under threat? A number of lions get killed for meaningless things like their bones. Their bones get used in medicine. So we lose these species almost without regard, because so few people are aware of the actual impacts that are taking place on our animals. I think in Lawrence's other books, his first book being Babylon's Ark and his second being The Elephant Whisperer, each one of those books, like The Last Rhinos, brings through that conservation message, but in a way that can be that people can easily accept and understand and feel like they're part of and be a part of the solution. And each book actually has a beautiful theme. When he wrote The Elephant Whisperer, I told him it would be a bestseller, which it was. And I often said to him it was only a bestseller because I said so. But when he finished The Last Rhinos, he said to me, "Do you think it'll be a bestseller?" And I said, "The stories are so different, so I wasn't sure." I said, "But it's probably the most important book that you've written because the message is so vital." And as it turns out, it was a bestseller because obviously the story is so gripping. The Elephant Whisperer has a very warm charm to it. It's a very easy book to just fall in love with, and the man and the story. But I was concerned with The Last Rhinos because the message was more serious, and I thought, would people be able to accept it and deal with that serious message without, feeling overwhelmed because of there are some tragic elements in it. But he truly did weave the story in such a beautiful way that people could accept the story, they could accept the tragedy, but also the solution, and then with that humor that he always weaves in, you end up just in those heavy moments, sort of maybe something light that just picks you up out of that, and that is certainly a testament to the man who left an indelible mark on this planet, and I think every reader that engages with him will have a similar opinion. Lawrence himself actually had no literary aspirations. He didn't consider himself a brilliant author, but I think that's part of the magic, is to just want to tell a story and want to engage and entertain and bring a message across powerfully, and in so doing actually did have some literary acclaim for his beautiful work. I think that's just my views and my message to others out there. If you've enjoyed this particular book, I highly recommend you read his other books. They are equally engaging and just give you a different world that you can immerse yourself in. And thank you very much for highlighting his work. It is lovely to be able to speak about this wonderful human that walked among us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yvette Taylor, for your remarks and your great initiatives that you do. Our next guest speaker joining us from LA, California, United States of America, is Ms. Barbara Wiseman, the International President of the Lawrence Anthony Earth Organization. Over the past 40 years, Barbara Wiseman has worked in senior executive positions in a variety of humanitarian organizations dedicated to helping improve conditions for her fellow men and life. During the 1970s, she oversaw the successful resettlement in the US of over 1,000 displaced refugees from Vietnam, Cambodia, Chile, and Iran. She went on to become the CEO of the Survival Strategies, Inc., an international firm directing management consulting services to over 4,000 clients. In 2003, Barbara was invited by world-renowned conservationist Dr. Lawrence Anthony, best known for his remarkable rescue initiative of the Baghdad Zoo, to help him create the Earth Organization, an environmental and conservation nonprofit. As its international president, Barbara has directed the organization in its work to isolate and implement long-term solutions on a large-scale environmental challenges. This has included the development of educational materials for government, industry, and school children, identifying, successfully advocating for technologies and that effectively clean up toxic spills that polluted waterways, and the implementation of cutting-edge technologies for locating and drilling for high-quality water in highly arid and drought-prone regions. We welcome Ms. Barbara Wiseman.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you today. Very honored to do so, and I appreciate it so much. This is most definitely, as Yvette said, I thoroughly agree. This is one of my favorite topics to speak about, is Lawrence Anthony. He had such a tremendous impact on my life and the lives of so many people. His humor, his courage, his audacity, his philosophy. And I was very, very honored to be able to count him as a dear and personal close friend. The story of Lawrence's attempt to save this species is truly extraordinary. And again, I obviously highly recommend this book. And yet it's just one of the many courageous endeavors that he launched to take a non-survival situation and turn it into a pro-survival scene. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the philosophy that the nation ought to forward. In fact, on page 19 in the book, he mentions a term that we created for this philosophy, which is cooperative ecology. And at the time Lawrence wrote this book, the definition that we had for it, I'd like to read actually what he said here, this short paragraph. The Earth Organization's policy of cooperative ecology, co-eco we call it, was paying off. We believe that the blind demonizing of commerce and industry that defined the green movement in the past has to end. People have to live on the planet. Both sides must develop a better understanding of the use and value of the natural world. If an animal rights group bluntly opposed mining, then I would expect all their members to stop using metal and glass in their own lives. Respect for biodiversity needs to be ingrained into industry, and sensitive areas must remain sacrosanct. But there's plenty of room for cooperation and compromise. Based on this philosophy, and it truly was, was so articulately stated by Yvette, working together mutually for the mutual long-term survival of other individuals, other groups, was the philosophy, the basic premise upon which Lawrence operated. Through this viewpoint, we have our mission that he laid out for us, which was through science-based research, hands-on projects, and education. We work with industry, commerce, government, scientists, academia, and civic leaders to bring rational solutions to environmental challenges in order to restore a thriving world for life. So that was basically the definition at the time Lawrence wrote the book. After that, we began delving into this concept and this philosophy and the subject even more. And the more we looked at it, the more we realized that the definition and the concept of co-eco was far more than just environmental groups working together with these other sectors. It is, in fact, one of the most fundamental principles for every form of life regarding how to survive. With this concept that we are working diligently to display, set a good example in the utilization of it, and in the creation of publications to educate various sectors, school children, etc., on this concept. But what we're seeking to instill in people is a sense and an understanding all life is interdependent, and that the decisions we all make affect the natural world, and then in turn circle back to affect the health and quality of life of each one of us. But, when this concept is understood, it better connects everyone to nature and is a way of getting people to better cooperate with each other, which was, again, very much a part of what Lawrence's, basic philosophy of life was. And through doing this, to bring about a greater understanding, to see the value in protecting and enhancing the natural world around each one of us. Again, this is how life survives. If we don't raise understanding of our vital partnership for mutual survival with the natural world, we are all going to be saving the rainforests and saving the whale and saving the rhinos until they're gone. Raising awareness of this concept and getting it infused throughout society will help us all to take a major step forward in bringing about a new age of intelligent and constructive decision making. We feel so strongly about this that as Yvette stated, the tagline for the Earth Organization is "Because none survive alone." And this really is a beautiful distillation of the entire concept. We believe that getting cooperative ecology understood and utilized broadly may be one of the only guarantees that humanity will be able to reverse the steep decline of our environment and the plant and animal kingdoms that we are currently experiencing. You can imagine my excitement based on all of this and our focus on instilling and infusing the concept of cooperative ecology throughout what we do and with the people that we work with. 2 days ago, I came across a study that was just completed a few months ago. I think back in March of 2020, by the Duke University, some scientists there, and their conclusion was fascinating to me that they had come to this conclusion. They concluded that Charles Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest was in fact an inaccurate premise, and that it had in fact created a lot of destruction throughout society as many people had taken on this viewpoint. After much observation of the real world, they came to the conclusion that those species that have survived best and been the strongest as a species through time are those who have learned to best cooperate with others. That was fascinating to me that this science group had come to that conclusion after observing, and something that Lawrence inspired in us starting back in 2003. I am very proud of the work that Yvette and the staff and our chapters are doing around the world to forward Lawrence's legacy. He was an extraordinary man, and I think that very much comes through in his book, in his many books, actually, his 3 books. I recommend them all. And I would be, I'll be ending off on my talk here, but I hope that you'll join us by becoming members and volunteers, corporate sponsors, get involved in some way, and help us to forward this magnificent man's legacy, which has everything to do with helping everyone survive and flourish better. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barbara Wiseman, for your very interesting remarks today. We've come to the concluding part of today's program, and we would like, on behalf of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, we would like to express a heartfelt gratitude to our guest speakers today. That is Ms. Barbara Wiseman, Ms. Yvette Taylor, Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh, most importantly, you, our guests and our viewers, for showing your contribution by watching all our programs. Thank you to Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal. Do purchase the book, The Last Rhinos by Dr. Lawrence Anthony, and Graham Spencer. Please stay tuned to SBCC social media pages for what's happening next. For me, namaskar.